Hi, good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. We very much appreciate this. And we want to welcome you this evening to the College Night for Families of Seniors. This presentation tonight was prepared by the counselors at OPRF, and we just want to introduce some of the people who are on our team tonight. So I will be presenting part of the evening. My name is Brandy Ambrose, and another presenter that's going to share tonight is Ms. Lynch, who's there with us now. And you're going to see two other individuals from the counseling department here with us as well, running tech and the Q&A. So we do encourage you to put some questions in that Q&A as we go through what I would determine is a lot of material this evening. And that's Derek Radziszewski and Megan Cahill as well. So thanks again for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. This presentation should last about 45 minutes, and then we're going to save some time for questions at the end. Again, please utilize the Q&A as that is being staffed live at this time. Next slide, please. So although we're not in person this evening, we do hope that you are home, out of the weather, maybe enjoying dinner and able to kind of process some of this material that we're going to share with you this evening. And please know that we are very happy to stay with you as long as you need to answer questions. So anything that you can think of, please know that we will stay and communicate and make sure that everything that you have questions about can be answered. Tonight, we're going to look at the big approach to the college application season. For example, we're going to start by looking at some of the big picture items that your children will be working with us on this year. We're going to talk about the action plan on how to attack this process. And then we're also going to share a wealth of resources as we wanted to give you a very well-rounded approach to everything that they're going to be experiencing this fall. And we really can't do that until we pause and just kind of, survey the scene and acknowledge everything that's happened in the last couple of years that may have, changed the playing field a little bit of, the college application season. For example, the bullet points listed there below would be things that the typical colleges are going to take a look at, process, use in determining the students that will matriculate to their colleges and universities. So some things might look a little different than they have in the past. For example, grades on transcripts. That was always kind of a given until the last year and a half. So colleges now might seem to sense that, wow, we have certain semesters with pass grades. Maybe there aren't A, B, C's, and D's. So they are absolutely expecting this, and they have plans in place. With test scores, you may be aware that it was pretty hard last year to get a seat at one of those standardized testing locations. So test scores is also something that the colleges have looked at and shifted as well. We have been talking about equity and access as well all through this process. And we know that there are groups of individuals who really did have a very, different reaction to COVID than others. So we are very aware of that, especially with mental health and the impacts that has as we're seeing kids in our building today. And obviously the visits, which many of our seniors now during junior year were not really able to take due to the restrictions on campus. So there's more that we want to just share with you, but we are going to pause and recognize that things may look a little different this year than they have in other years. Next slide, please. So how are colleges responding? So what we have done is we go right to the source. We ask our college admissions reps. We have relationships with these individuals, and we do notice, and they do share with us, that they are shifting in how they are processing and looking at students and considering applications this year. Most of the individuals that we spoke with, they're going to use this term that you're going to probably hear a lot. It's called the holistic review, which means they're going to look at everything that might encompass what a student can put forward in terms of showing who they are as a person, a student, and academic. So this differs from college to college, obviously, but we want to kind of use that holistic review in our conversation tonight. So most of the colleges, they're going to spend a little extra time looking at those personal essays. They're going to want to see what we determine as kind of the biggest piece of real estate in the college application, that personal essay. They're going to take a look at the letters of recommendation from counselors and teachers. And then a few colleges have also determined that they're going to offer impromptu questions just to kind of see what the student might say with a question that's not as scripted. And it's also going to be a challenge because lack of standardized test scores is evident as our seniors will be making their applications to college. So that does not mean that every single school is test optional or test blind. Many are going that direction, but it doesn't mean that the ACT and SAT aren't important in the application process. So we're going to get into those specifics in just a few moments. Again, we're going to share with you the research that we have gathered. There are so many unknowns at this point that those of us in the counseling department, we pick up the phone, we call the admissions offices of these schools, and we ask the source. So we just try to get the most up-to-date information that we can. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in our research, we did kind of stumble upon a few things that we kept seeing as a recurring trend, and we wanted to share those with you tonight. So last year, when we look at the number of applicants that applied to colleges and universities, what we saw was that a small increase of users were using the Common Application, which is an application that services over 900 different colleges and universities. But we did see those students who were making those applications submit applications to more schools. So it's not that we saw more students applying to school, but we did see more applications per student. NACAC is a source that the counselors use. It's a national organization. And just kind of looking at some of their research and their data to give you a benchmark, around 84% or so, this was as of a week ago, 84% of colleges say they will most likely go test optional or test blind for 2022. Again, we're going to ask you, and we're going to meet with your children next week. We're going to ask you to go to the source every time that there's a question about is my school test optional, is it test blind? We're going to use the tools at our fingertips to have the most up-to-date information. Another trend is that there is most likely going to be a larger in-person population of learning this fall. And so colleges are looking at that, and they're trying to determine whether or not that's going to inspire more students to send in their applications to these schools. And also, we don't want to forget our resource right in our own backyard, our community colleges. They were hit pretty hard during the last year and a half. However, we do want to share some resources with you in case you're looking to stay close, and also economically, there are a few opportunities just in a Triton College as well. There are some links that are embedded in this presentation, which we're going to share with you tomorrow. So if you're interested in something like the Triton Scholars Program, you want to learn more about that, you're going to have the opportunity to utilize this PowerPoint and click right into the links to learn about those details. Next slide, please. This starts off the great conversation that you're probably going to have in your homes very, very soon. These are the steps of the application process. The majority of these details will be shared with your children on Tuesday and Thursday of next week when we start to meet with them in groups to lay out kind of some information that they're going to start to consider, get their feet wet in terms of the actual process. We want to let you know this is what they're going to be working on. So any conversations that you want to have at home, we are centering on these 5 topics with them next week. So we're looking at a final list of colleges. So the majority of our students will send in an application right around Halloween. So we do have a little bit of time here. So wanted to make sure that the decisions that are made, we look at this again from that big picture modality. Your son or daughter will use Naviance. We all use that. So we're going to show you later in the presentation how to link to that as a parent. Also, you'll have the instructions for the student portion as well. And we're also going to talk a lot about this document called the Common Application. Again, it's a 7-page application that over 900 different colleges will utilize. So we're going to throw links in there as well so you can kind of see what that looks like. Number 2, students are going to start actually working on those applications, and whether or not they're going to use the Common App or a school specific, this can be determined from, based on what schools they're going to apply to, and we're going to show you resources about that as well. We're also going to consider essays and test scores as we discussed, and then recommendations as well by their teachers. And at this point, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Lynch, and we'll be back to you soon.
All right, good evening. I just want to shout out to all those parents of seniors out there. I join you in your nail biting ranks. So at any rate, even though I've been a longtime counselor here, I'm still sitting in the role of a parent as well. We are going to, oh, Ed, can you move to the next slide, please? We're going to ask your child to make a final list. What we think a final list should look like, and I know it makes all of our kids nervous, is somewhere between 6 and 10 schools. And we really do think that that is possible. And all of us who have watched kids go through this process over the years know that if you add a lot more than 10 schools to that list, it's just a frenetic, time-consuming process, and it just adds to the stress. So we're going to really try to help your child get that list down to 6 to 10. And we're going to provide them, and there's a hyperlink in the presentation, with a way to kind of narrow down their criteria. Maybe they've already done it through their thinking over the summer, or maybe they can do it in the next few weeks. We want a good mix of safeties, matches, and reaches, and we're going to show you some Naviance scattergrams, and we're going to show you how to get onto Naviance tonight, just to kind of get a sense of what a safety might look like, or a match, or a reach. We also strongly encourage having a financial safety, or a regional safety. So if you know that your child is, prone to being homesick, have that conversation with them early. Financial safeties are often where your child exceeds the admissions requirements by a pretty significant amount, and then you may be able to, as a result of that, get some merit money. So at any rate, we want your kids to be working on a final list in the next couple of weeks. All right, next slide, please. So here are some tools. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to show you Naviance later, but we recommend Supermatch and College Match on Naviance, and they just give you an opportunity to type in criteria, so whether that is location or size or major. Supermatch is a terrific tool. College Match says, like, if you're applying to University of Illinois and University of Wisconsin, they're going to pair you up with other similar schools. If you're looking at smaller schools, same kind of thing. So it has a list of kind of what we call cross apps. So if you're likely to apply to Bradley, you might also be applying to Drake. College Board, also, I am a big fan of the Big Future search engine on the College Board. And these are just some of the resources out there, but these are the ones that I and most of my colleagues go to pretty regularly for searching. We're also going to be meeting with your students next week in group meetings. We'll also be following up with individual meetings. So looking forward to those conversations. Next slide, please. So this is Naviance. This is the section of Naviance that really puts butts in seats for us, and that is our scattergrams. So you can see on here, so if we take a typical just top 50% student at Oak Park and River Forest High School, kid has a 2.9 GPA, 1200 SAT. You can see all the green that has been checked off, and you can see how many kids apply to University of Wisconsin from our high school. And you can see where a student is likely to fall in this scatter plot. So a kid with a 2.9 and a 1200 SAT is likely to be denied. Now, we're not guaranteeing denial. We're not promising denial. We just, kind of statistically, this is where it looks for a kid with a 2.9. But you can also see on here, and hopefully you've had a chance to sit down with your child and look at the scattergrams, where you're likely to fall into the sweet spot. Next slide, please. So again, for this similar student, 2.9 GPA, 1200 SAT, a school like Illinois State is going to be a match. We're going to call it a match. So you can see that this student would be accepted at Illinois State. Now, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't get accepted to lots of other schools, but that just gives you a sense of how to gauge where your child falls. Next slide, please. And then right in our backyard, not our backyard, downtown, Columbia College is a art school, but it also has all kinds of other majors. And you can see that this child could call this school a safety because they're open admission and lots of opportunities to study all kinds of things at our lovely Columbia College. Next slide, please. So we also know that the opportunity to visit college campuses was really, really difficult in the last year. So even over the summer, I think kids couldn't get on campus. So we are going to be sharing all of these virtual college fairs. NACAC is our go-to source. This is the National Association of College Admissions Counselors, and they are hosting a bunch of virtual events. They've also produced a variety of presentations from colleges, and you can find those on the Strive Scan virtual college fairs. There are HBCUs, the Chicago HBCU Alliance, also hosting college fairs. And this isn't a full comprehensive list, but it's just a sense of what is out there. National Portfolio Day, for those students who are thinking about art school, you can have advice on your portfolio. The National Unified Theater Auditions, they're actually held in Chicago, so that's really nice for your theater kids. And again, just virtual college fairs where you can make up for the fact that none of us were able to leave town for the year. We've also linked to a worksheet on here that your child can use if they want to. It's a pretty thorough worksheet just to take notes. But after, a couple, and all of us do college visits all the time, after a couple of colleges, they start to blend. So it's helpful to just take notes and take photos and help your child think about how the schools are different. Next slide, please. We also have next slide. Okay, got it. We also have a slew of college callers who come to this high school. We are going to be doing all of these meetings virtually for the college callers. So they're going to be virtual, but our students will be here in our rooms. We have a college center that they can come to. And to sign up for the college callers, they can sign up on a Remind. They should have signed up last year. We really talked to them about it, but just double check and make sure that they're signed up for the Reminds. And that just lets them know which colleges are coming this week. We're starting those college callers in September. Again, the students will be here, obviously, and then the college callers will be virtual. Next slide, please. There are Remind notifications and there's push notifications. Again, you can have access to all of this information on how to join when we show you this, when we give you the copy of this presentation. So I don't want to dwell on this too much. It's kind of, we're getting into the weeds. Next slide, please. All right, so we always get this question, what are colleges looking for? Academic rigor is what they always say. And again, with the understanding that we all went through something last year. So there are a variety of ways to explain, either the tremendous success that your child had or some of the struggles that they had. And that's something that we can address in counselor letters. It's something that your child can address in an essay. We'll talk about that as well. But generally, we like to see an upward trend for grades. You've always heard the junior year is super important. They're also going to be looking at the just your child's ability to write. And we strongly recommend getting going on those essays sooner rather than later. It takes time to swim around in your brain, get those words right, get those ideas honed and thought through. And they're not a one-nighter kind of essay. These are something that you want to spend significant amount of time on. And luckily, most of our English teachers are doing some kind of essay writing in classes, and we will also be hosting an evening talking about writing essays. All right, again, test scores. You don't want to have like this amazing test score and a GPA that doesn't match it because they kind of wonder what happened. But we can also rely on the fact that many schools, if test scores are not the way that your child shows their strengths, a lot of schools are going test optional. Schools do think about demonstrated interest, and we were just curious about it, like how many schools do. So about 15% of colleges think it's important. Another 21% think it's about moderately important. 34% say it's limited. And 28% say we don't care at all. So that's something, again, that if your child is like, how can I show demonstrated interest when I wasn't able to visit? That's something that we can talk about with them individually going into these college callers in the fall. Obviously, we want to show that your child is not just an academic robot, but that there is a variety of activities that they have done. So degree of involvement, evidence of growth. And we're also going to be relying on teachers to talk about your child in the classroom. Next slide, please.
Thank you. And depending on where your child will apply, these are the components of an application that many of the seniors will be working through, that they will be spending a lot of time on. Ms. Lynch already covered that the essay and the potential supplementary essays that some are, if they're required from those colleges, that's really where we want to make sure that the seniors are spending their time. This should tell their story. This should answer the question. There's a lot of different things that we like to work on with students, and the counseling department is happy to be one of those readers. But to Ms. Lynch's point, our English department is fantastic, and our students feel very comfortable with their teachers, and usually that's who will take another look at their essay, someone who they trust, someone who they can bounce ideas off of. So the Common Application, as I had mentioned before, is an application used by over 900 schools. That's not every school. Every school doesn't use the Common Application. So when you make that list of 6 to 10 schools, you'll be able to determine how many schools are on the Common App or how many are direct, so on and so forth. Almost every school, not all, almost every school would like to see the student's transcript. And for that to happen, the student owns the transcript. So we want to make sure that we know exactly what is needed in terms of where they want these materials to go. So next week, when we work with your students, they're going to see something called the transcript release form. It's going to allow them to put all the schools they're curious or they're planning to apply to on one document. They're going to sign, giving us permission to go ahead and send that forward. And then our assistants help to get all these materials together. We will talk about whether or not test scores are a good thing, or maybe something that we are going to hold back during this optional test line. And again, the way that we're going to do that is we're going to visit the scattergram, and we're going to see where your child falls. And then we can kind of make those determinations. If you ever have questions, we encourage the students to sit with us. We can also, check in with you at home as well. Recommendation letters, very, very helpful. Some schools want 0 letters of rec. So we follow the rules. We follow the instructions from these schools. Other colleges require 2 teachers, maybe 1 counselor. So again, when we're going through the process, each school is unique. And so we just kind of fit the parameters that they've put out there. Your number 6 is going to talk a little bit about finances. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. Many colleges and universities do like to see the FAFSA, and this is how they determine if you're eligible for grants and loans. The CSS profile is used a lot by private schools and institutions. So depending on where your child applies, either one or both could be in the lineup for the components of this application. Also, there are students who are going to go to music schools. There are students who are going to go into art programs. So those institutions may then also recommend or require an audition or portfolio. So again, very individualized, but we wanted to give you the big picture here on what to look for. Next slide, please. Thank you. We've talked about the Common App a couple times. The numbers keep growing. Schools do subscribe to this. The nice thing about Common App is if you are lucky enough to have a list of schools that all subscribe to the Common App, it is the same standard application that you send. Let's say you have 6 schools on the Common App, you send the same application 6 times. Yes, you do pay for each of those separately as well. However, it does save the student some time and energy in filling out some of the demographics. They will have the opportunity, this is a new update, they will have the opportunity to explain in a short answer how the pandemic may have affected them. So what that leads us to believe in terms of counseling is that the main essays don't have to resonate strictly about what the experiences of COVID and the pandemic has had, unless that's something that the student feels is most integral to tell. So we also, as counselors, write letters of recommendations for our students, their individual letters, and we will absolutely share some of those components if they're important to the student's application to their life, and if we have permission to share some things as well. Okay, so there's a resource there if you want to check it out. Again, this is a little bit of a change based on the last year and a half and how colleges in the Common App are going to fluctuate. It is interesting that usually before this time, there was a question on the Common App that dealt with discipline. That's no longer a question. So maybe some of your individual colleges may require you to answer that question, but it's now not on the Common App. And we do really, really want to stress that, as Ms. Lynch alluded to, you don't want to have this essay written in one night. We think about a third of applicants are writing their college essay and submitting the night before their application is due. So it would be very, very helpful. And that was, from my perspective, my summer assignment for my students, and I'm sure most of my colleagues as well, is to get a rough draft of that essay. So, it's not a bad idea to maybe nudge your child tonight and just kind of say, can you show me a rough draft of your essay? Whether or not you want to read it or critique it, let's just make sure there's some ink on the paper, per se. Next slide, please. So there are some, technical issues when we're trying to share information from, let's say the transcript here at the high school with Common App. So that's why we utilize Naviance. Most of what we do is kind of a conduit in Naviance to Common App. So there are a lot of details that your children will see next week. We are actually trying to be extremely proactive and make how-to videos so they can just reference a link and see these things. But just so you're aware, and if you hear this terminology at home, there are things that are going to happen for all these pieces and parts to get to the university or colleges together and on time. So you're going to hear us talk with the kids about how we link Naviance and Common App. We'll show them how to do these steps. We have to make sure their names and the date of birth, all those things must match. It's a really technical issue if they don't, so it's a challenge if you've submitted something in a nickname or a middle name. So we just want to make sure that everything is as perfect as it can be. So we're not going to click on the here's how link at this time, but know that this is there for you. I know I go through and I watch it a couple times, especially when kids come in and they're like, can you help me link this? And we absolutely will help with all of these details, but it's nice if you have them at your fingertips as well. There are a few other things that we do for students who apply through the Common App, and it's a very, very common question is the colleges want to see how they're doing after first semester. And sometimes that's a deciding factor. Sometimes they just want to kind of check in, but that's called the mid-year report. So that's their transcript after the fall semester. So those automatically get sent from our office if your child applies through Common App. So that's just one thing you don't have to worry about. It will go. And the final transcript at the very end of the year goes to one school, the school that they choose that they are going to matriculate at. Okay, next slide, please. This is something that my students kind of make fun of me for. I was printing these and handing them out at the end of the year. I guess not handing them out, sending them out via email. I said, wouldn't it be fun if you just sat with your families or your friends or whoever and just kind of read through these and talked about the different essay prompts that there are for Common App. See if there's a great story that you forgot about or something that really lends to who you are as a person. I did get the teenage blank stare, like, no, I'm not going to sit with my friends and talk about the Common App essay prompts, Ms. Ambrose. However, we wanted to share these 7 essay prompts with you. Many of them have not changed. There are maybe 2 new ones through the years, but these are the choices that your children will have if they're completing the Common App. Please remember that on the Common App, they will choose only one prompt, and that will go to all the schools. So they can't really go in there and profess their love for, Boston College, because that's going to be seen by all the schools that receive the Common App and their essay. So we're not going to read through these essay prompts, but it might be interesting. I don't know, maybe you find it interesting to sit and go through these at the dinner table with your family. So next slide, please. And there are the rest there for you to enjoy. Next slide, please. And we're really excited because we are also going to put on an essay writing workshop in September. So our hope is that if your kids are experiencing writer's block, if they're just not sure if their essay is up to speed, if they're just stuck, we want to make sure that they have an outlet so they're able to bounce ideas off. We have writing activities. We have a bunch of different things we'd like to share with them. So please, please, please encourage them. Maybe even put this on the calendar, on the refrigerator, and see if you can, encourage your kids to come to our essay writing workshop. I imagine it's going to be virtual, so hopefully you can join us. And some of the very, very important tips that we want to make sure of when the students are choosing their essays and writing on their essays is that, number one, they answer the question that's asked. Sometimes students really get into the flow of writing and they go down a much different path, and they have to come back to that essay prompt and make sure they answer that question. We do encourage someone to proofread it, obviously check the grammar and spelling, those kinds of things. And, keep copies just in case. It's interesting. Sometimes colleges would like to see a paper from an English class that's graded. So there are different things that these colleges and universities might ask for. So, but what we do share with kids over and over again is that their voice is key. It needs to be at the center of their essay. So if, I'm critiquing it, if Lynch is critiquing it, we also want to share with the student, take our critiques, do with them what you will. The voice still needs to be yours and it needs to be authentic. So please, again, encourage your students to join us for the essay writing workshop in September. Next slide, please, and Ms. Lynch.
All right, so we're getting there. We're going to get through this. Thanks for hanging in with us. Senior year testing. If your child is still interested in taking tests, there are some fall testing opportunities coming up. I would say that the last possible time to really take it would be in October. But if you want to register for the SAT or the ACT, they are interchangeable. It does not matter which one you take. Go ahead and go to the registration site. If you need a waiver, we can offer that as well. There are some colleges that will do something called super scoring. Well, they'll like mix and match the tests. And again, we can call the colleges. We can ask the reps when they're here. Other colleges just prefer the highest composite score. But our favorite trend in admissions is that 65% of colleges are test optional. And there is a wonderful organization called fairtest.org. That is the source that we use. There are many sources online, including the colleges themselves, but Fairtest is our best place, our go-to site for figuring out which schools are test optional. And just so you know, some schools are still kind of deciding, even at this late date. So at any rate, things are changing, but we're paying close attention. Next slide, please. So here are the test dates. Again, you can get this all online. Just wanted to make you aware of when they are. Next slide, please. Same thing for the ACT. There are late registration opportunities. It's usually about 2 weeks before you get the test results back. So if you have a November 1 deadline and the results don't come back until November 2nd, you might want to rethink that. At any rate, we can get into those specifics with your children. Next slide, please. And this is kind of an interesting part because when we say that schools are test optional, there's a lot of ways to interpret that. So there are test optional schools that are really test optional. They don't really care, but they might need other information in order to qualify for scholarships. There are test flexible schools where the university kind of allows people to submit different standardized scores to support their application. Wake Forest does this, NYU does this. And then there are also test blind schools, and they just don't want your stinking scores. The UC schools in California they're just not only test blind, they are test negative. Don't send them. So at any rate, a wide range of test optional iterations. So just again, let's go to the source. Let's make sure we've got the most up-to-date information. Next slide, please. We have said that recommendation letters matter more in a world where we're not sure what happened with grades or where test scores may or may not be a true reflection. But not all schools want them. And again, we want to show these colleges, we want your child to show these colleges that they can follow directions. So if they say they only want one recommendation, they only want one recommendation. So again, we'll help your child take a look at Common App, we'll have them take a look at the websites, but not all schools want recommendations. However, most Common App schools do, rule of thumb, usually 2. The idea of sending 10 college or recommendation letters is it's more than a college really wants to read, frankly. And so let's just tighten it up with just 2, unless there's some extenuating circumstance, something that you're really trying to highlight from, some other outside of the school source. And again, those are conversations that we can have. Now, if you remember nothing else, or if your child remembers nothing else from tonight, we cannot emphasize enough to not request letters of recommendation through the Common App. There is some weird tech glitch. I don't understand it, but if you request through the Common App for the teacher rec, it blocks all other kids from asking that same teacher. So again, no requesting letters through the Common App. However, we're going to show your child how to do it through Naviance. And so we've asked your kids to talk to their teachers. They may have talked to them in person in the spring, or they may have shot them an email over the summer. That is all fine. And then we'll show them how to do the next technical piece of asking through Naviance. We really, really love 3 weeks prior notice, because if everyone asked us on Halloween, we wouldn't be able to complete these recommendation letters. So please give us the courtesy of at least 3 weeks, and we'll get them done and out. So again, teachers are going to be, we want to give teachers that same amount of time. You're also going to be able to see on Naviance if the teacher has submitted. And so this is kind of the sticky zone where you get kind of nervous. It's getting to be Halloween Eve and you're wondering if the letters went out. We definitely want to use our technology rather than asking teachers for their rec letters. If they're, they're not going to miss the deadline. I've never had a teacher miss a deadline, but they might be submitting it on Halloween. So at any rate, next slide, please. So here's how we'll show the kids how to do this on Naviance. It'll tell the schools, it'll say which schools, how many recommendation letters they want, required, allowed, requested, and it'll also be able to tell you when and if the letters have been uploaded and if they've been sent. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to hand off to Ms. Ambrose.
Thank you. So we do need to talk about deadlines, dates, timelines of sorts. I like two different avenues to look at this. I really do appreciate Naviance's College I'm Thinking About page, because when your children put in the colleges that they're considering applying to, you will get a grid that'll say the college does accept early applications or priority or early decision. It tells you the actual date that the deadline would fall on. So I would recommend that once you are working with your children on colleges I'm thinking about, just take a look at that grid. It really does help to put things in one place. However, there are other resources and different platforms that we use. So toward the end of the presentation, we're going to pull up a couple different documents where, maybe you prefer one over the other. We don't have a preference. All we hope is that the organization is in place, because if you look at these components, essay, rec letters, I mean, it's a lot. So, and I think this is the piece that tends to bring the most amount of stress on students at this point. I would love, love, love for each of the seniors to utilize the documents that we have in this presentation, because I feel like once they get it down on paper, they see their dates, they organize, it just lets them take a deep breath, and then they can pick apart how they want to attack the process. So again, all of these things that are listed on the screen, some schools might, ask for an audition, they'll let you know the time frame on that, but it's important because kids aren't just doing the applications. They're playing sports, they're enjoying their senior year, they're in their academics. So this timeline piece is pretty important. So organization at the start is pretty key. Next slide, please. So I'm going to try, let's see if we could do this. Could you please click on the useful organization tool there, please? And let's see if that pulls up. Excellent. So this is a document I believe Ms. Lynch and Ms. Cahill used during their summer session, which we're going to plug as well, because they ran a summer program in helping students, if you have youngers coming up, in terms of getting this application process in place in the summer. So this is one of the documents that they use. As you can tell, some students might like this. I'm a checklist kind of person, so this would work great in my home. Others, maybe they want to do something different, but here's all the information that is extremely helpful to make sure everything goes out on time and is complete. All right, thanks very much. You can go and click out of there and head back to the slide. Thank you. We're just gonna, I don't know what everybody in our department can make their own plans. I'm gonna have copies of this just ready for my seniors, just in case they want, a hard copy. So believe me, there are other ways to organize out there. Here's just one or two. All right, next slide, please. As we talked about before, each of our counselors write individualized letters for our seniors. And I think the majority of us take a lot of pride in that. We take our 4-year relationship or however long we've been with your child, and we try to speak about them and share their personality and who they are. We try to share that with the colleges and universities, and we want to put them in their very, very, very best light. We ask them to do a questionnaire for us. There's a parent questionnaire that we can, talk about later as well. The more details, the better. But in order for us to be able to have all these materials out on time, we do need that lead time. So this slide here just shows you a little bit about when the college deadline might be. For example, if your child is going to apply for the November 1 deadline, just follow across and know that, okay, around October 8th, we're hoping that we have all their materials. We hope that they've requested their transcript. We hope that they have done their questionnaire for us, spoken to their teachers about letters of rec. So to me, this is an important slide just to make sure that nothing is missed. Next slide, please. This is probably the most commonly asked question once we get into the nuts and bolts of the college application process. We have to have the permission of the student and all the right details. Is it Tampa? Is it Tampa State? Which school are we looking at? There are a variety of Iowa schools. So if your child turns in a transcript release form and says, send my transcript to Iowa, that's not enough. So the transcript release form, you can click on that at your leisure, and it just shows you the material that the kids will fill out. And there's also an instructions link as well, just in case there are any questions. We do provide some opportunities on this transcript release forms for things like NCAA, in case they're going to play college athletics. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Or if they're looking to apply for a particular scholarship, and that scholarship might want to see that transcript. Next slide, please. Okay, and these are the different types of admissions responses that you might see in the mail once your child has made their application. And on the left-hand side, regular, rolling, early action, and early decision. These are the variety of admission decisions that one could receive. So for example, we're not going to go through each and every one, but with regular, so there's a specific deadline where you need to submit that application. With rolling, it means that that college or university will take applicants, read their applications, and give admission decisions on a rolling basis. Usually, and this is again, rule of thumb, 4 to 6 weeks, they would have that decision. If the college of choice goes under an early action or priority, that usually means around November 1st to the 15th. And they should have the admission decision sometime in December. And it's interesting, some of those colleges and universities, the day before they go on break is when they kind of release those decisions. So just kind of know when those might come forth. And we do need to talk about early decision. Early decision is a binding agreement. So this is when we really counsel the students, we work with them, we call the families to make sure that everyone understands that if you go early decision, you're pretty much saying at that point, this is the school that you want to attend. So there could be financial implications in that as well. So we just definitely want to make sure we have that conversation. So early decision is a binding agreement. Next slide, please. And here are the decisions that you might see. Accepted and denied are two that we referenced on the scattergram. Deferred means they looked at the application at one point, and then they're going to put that into the regular pool. You got pushed to the next pool. Waitlisted is something that's a little bit of a heartbreak sometimes for kids. They really want to get into a school, but that school sometimes will take time to determine whether or not that child will get off the wait list. So sometimes that does happen after that May 1st. So it's tricky. Students are the May 1st deadline is kind of important to let the college of choice know that you are attending or not. So the waitlisted can push those deadlines a little bit back. Okay, next slide, please. And if your child is, when I looked at those scattergrams, it's like sometimes kids are right on that bubble and you're not quite sure if it's a reach, a match, a safer school based on those scores. A lot of colleges and universities have alternative admission programs, for example, the ones that are listed here. Some colleges will ask or require the student to start 3 weeks early on campus and spend part of the summer getting used to campus, understanding where the tutoring centers are, understanding where they can get help if needed. So there are a few programs that, if you're right on that bubble, we want you to take a look at these alternative admission options. All right, turning it over to Ms. Lynch.
Thank you. All right, for the scary topic of financial aid, and we just want to let everyone know, if you have older children, that the FAFSA is now a graduation requirement. So even if your child is not expected to get financial aid, you know that your family's financial situation, that is still a requirement, or you have to fill out a waiver. So why not get on that? October 1st, you can open up the FAFSA. We've included a few more links in here where you can see the FAFSA forecaster. It lets you know whether or not you could get some money, and that's always exciting to find out. The CSS profile, and I just want to explain, never, ever, ever pay for financial aid advice. Like, there's lots of websites that say, for $50, we'll guarantee that you'll get a certain amount of money. Just get your radar up and get off that website. The one exception to that is the CSS profile. It's through the College Board. They know how to make money, and they have this extra metric that they use and they're mostly for private schools. They just kind of look a little more deeply into your finances than the FAFSA. We have a terrific resource, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and our representative is Adriana Castillo. She is going to be coming here on a bi-weekly basis throughout the fall, and we encourage families and students to sit down with her with any of your specific questions. She's terrific at helping kids fill out the FAFSA, and she also makes herself very available through a Calendly app, which if you click on this link, and you don't have to right now, Ed, but when we send this out, you can make an appointment with Adriana Castillo. Next slide, please. The good news is that the state of Illinois has many, many opportunities to try to increase access for kids. And so if you meet the qualifications, so for instance, the Northern Illinois has the Husky Pledge, 3.0 GPA, household income less than $75,000, that could be free tuition for a year. Same thing at Southern Illinois, it's just a different salary, it'd be under $63,000. And the University of Illinois also has a commitment to making sure that college is affordable. Again, you have to qualify for both on income and often on grades. Next slide, please. Our website also has terrific information on our many, many local scholarships. We like to tell kids on our local scholarships to just get your applications in October, November, and December, and then hit the scholarship phase of the application process later after you get those applications in. Naviance also has a wealth of scholarship information, and we'll get that information pushed out to families and to students as soon as possible. You are more than welcome to access all of the many, many scholarship websites that are out there, and there are lots of national scholarships that we don't do through our local scholarships, but there's plenty of information on scholarships out there. Do not assume that private colleges cost more. They often have a sticker price that is kind of shocking, but that they'll make up for it in aid and merit money and that kind of stuff. So again, don't be totally scared off by the sticker price. Let's dig a little bit more into it. But you can help your child think about what $60,000 means to your family. I mean, I think for most teenagers to say $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 is like, they may as well be guessing how many beans there are in that jelly bean counter. It just doesn't mean anything to them. But if you can say, listen, this is what our family can afford, that would be helpful conversations to start having now. We will be having a financial aid night October 7th. We have a wonderful rep from Notre Dame who comes in and explains the process. So again, many resources on financial aid coming your way. Next slide, please. We also recommend these websites, and this is not all of the opportunities out there to find scholarships, but we recommend FastWeb, scholarships.com, CapEx, and Big Future. Again, just be cautious about any website that asks you for money. So these are ones that we can recommend that don't require money. Next slide, please. All right, some of our students are going to be applying to athletic programs, and there are a few extra steps that they have to go through with NCAA eligibility, and we can walk your students through that. We have terrific athletic director, terrific athletic department that can help with that as well. But you should have your child, if they are a recruited athlete or intend to play college sports at the Division I or II level, they should have an NCAA account, and then we'll be able to send the transcript directly to the NCAA. Next slide, please. Alternatives to college. Not everyone is ready to head off to college. You know, we've had one heck of a year. All kinds of things have happened in the world. I am a big fan of gap years. We will be hosting a gap year fair here in January. The reps are going to come in and set up shop, COVID willing. And it's just a great way to just think about a way to just maybe take a break before heading off to college, or to stretch your wings in some other capacity other than an academic one for a year. We recommend that gap year fair. There's also AmeriCorps. I think President Biden has reinvigorated the Civilian Conservation Corps for those New Deal fans out there. Of course, the military is a option that many of our kids consider. And then we're also here to help your children consider employment if that's their path. Next slide, please. All right. We know that we've thrown a lot at you. We're going to share all of this so that you can go back and look at it with your kids. But we do want you to consider, and I'm saying this to myself as much as I'm saying it to all of you, so we really want the kids to drive this process. As much as you can, you know, let them say what they really are interested in. And of course, with your guidance, of course, with your suggestions, but we really want kids to be filling out those applications. We want kids to be turning in their transcript forms. We want kids to be asking questions of us. And again, we're open to questions from parents, of course, but as much as we can, let's have the kids really try to drive this process. And then help them figure out, like, is this a good match for them? And you know your child way, way better than we do. So please help them to make choices that are good for them, but not necessarily choices that are always good for you. Your kids are going to need help with organization. I have a sophomore in college, and we had a refrigerator poster board that had absolutely everything up. I, like Ms. Ambrose, love a good to-do list. And so whatever you can do to help your child with deadlines and an organization system. Other 2 points, just know that there's disappointment baked into this process. There is just no way to avoid it. And in fact, I think it's a good part of it. Because if we got into every single college, we might wonder, whoa, why didn't I apply to Oxford? So at any rate, there is some disappointment in, and just help them weather it to the extent that you can. We are big believers that there is no Nirvana U, there is no perfect school. So again, help your kids think of a range of options that are going to make them happy. And also please communicate any financial parameters and that are just realistic for your family. Next slide, please.
Okay, congratulations, audience. You made it to the closing credits of our presentation right before we're going to go ahead and take some questions. We encourage you to dig a little deeper in any of these areas that you or your child is interested in. So, you know, we didn't get into specifics on every different type of college, university, you know, climate, those types of things. So we put together these following pages here as well. So if you kind of scroll down this list, if you're, you know, if your kid is looking for an HBCU and that's their dream, we want you to go and you know, click on this, go down, you know, and start to really dig deep on that research. And when the students meet with us, we absolutely help them find all the pieces and parts that they're still questioning or answering, you know, and same with art schools and theater programs. So this is the start of our resources page. Next slide, please. In the ever changing landscape that's out there, we wanted to offer you some of the resources that we use, that we share with students. So again, essay is a big component of that application. So we have compiled a list of different options here that you can use as resources, just in case you want to have those conversations, in case you want to be in the know. Again, those organizational tools down at the bottom. We have worksheets, we have lists, we have different questions that you can ask on visits. And again, we just would like to provide every source that we use, and we want to put those in your toolbox also. Next slide, please. And more. You can absolutely nerd out with us if you'd like. We are in our division listening to many podcasts and reading books and going to seminars on college and just kind of talking with admissions reps. So we gathered some of the things that we look at, that we read, that we use as resources as well. Next slide. And again, sometimes you hear the phrase that, you know, if you've mentioned something 3 times, it finally sticks. So we're only going to mention this twice, but we do know this is going to be a topic of conversation in your home with your kids. Naviance is the tool. It is the hub. It's what we need to use to make everything get to the colleges and universities. So please take a few moments and maybe just, like, you know, ask your child to log on to Naviance, take a look at what their site looks like. You have a parent login if you haven't accessed it yet. So we put all the facts here for you to log on, and Family Access is a organization here at the high school that'll help you with all those little tech questions that they can see behind the scenes that we might not have access to. Also, you know, this is the age where your kids prefer, you know, text messages, and they like to watch YouTube videos on how to do things. I prefer some of those as well. So our division went through and added a few things on how to add your teacher letter of recommendation to Naviance and how to match your Common App. So some things that are just very technical, but when you see them, it does take, you know, the head scratching out of it a little bit more. Next slide, please. And quite frankly, what we want to share with you is that you are not alone in this process. We hope over the last 4 years that you have seen the relationships that we have fostered with your children. And senior year is a time when many of those relationships get stronger and stronger, because of the time that we're together and learning about these goals and these hopes and dreams of your kids, that we share in that, and we want to support that. So we just thank you very much for being here, for digesting a lot of this content and information that will be offered to your kids next week. And again, don't hesitate, reach out to your counselor if you have any questions whatsoever. And what we'd like to do at this point is to welcome our other 2 department members here, Mr. Radoszewski and Ms. Cahill. And they've been monitoring the Q&A and answering some of your questions. And if you guys want to come on and join us and field some questions, we would be happy to answer questions that have come up this evening.
That would require me to stop typing. Sorry, I promise I will get through all of them. I'm at about 7:15.
Thank you very much for all the questions. There is a lot of questions that are somewhat specific, and if your question is not was not addressed or will not be addressed, please feel free to contact your individual counselor. But there is a lot of, I would say, anxiety about how to start and where to go. So I think the bottom line is where to start, like while you're here, and that's very important. There's a lot of information that you received today, and there will be a lot of information your child will receive on next week as well. And although it seems a lot, but it's a lot of new information, it's going to make sense. It's going to be, this process seems confusing, but actually it is, it's enjoyable as well. It's kind of looking for a next step in your child's life, and it can be fun, stressful, but fun. If it comes
Mr. Radoszewski has very young children. No, it can be fun. I'm just teasing. The information we share with your children next week is not a whole new set of information. So it's quite similar. I tried to answer in the chat as many things that were for the good of the order. We will definitely capture the questions from the Q&A that seemed to be a concern. So we had already talked about that in advance with our tech team. So we'll capture that and make sure that we make that available to attendees as well. And I tried to answer all if it seemed like something that everyone could benefit from, or privately if it seemed more specific to your child. And I do have more to answer. There's probably more right now.
Grab
And we
some
can,
Q&A as well, or
yeah, we can definitely take some. I think we answered this one live. Typical time frame to hear back from colleges after the student has applied, 4 to 6 weeks. I believe I heard you guys indicate was most typical. Obviously, if you apply early action, you're going to hear much sooner. Oftentimes on the admissions page for a school, they will let you know a time frame to expect to hear from, depending on which deadline you choose.
And just a heads up, just when we share this presentation on slide 31, it'll tell you the 4 different types of admissions and those deadlines. So if you want to kind of review that after you see which admissions types are offered by the colleges of choice for your child, that would be way more specific once you have that information as well.
Do you have to apply to local community colleges or just enroll? They are open enrollment, but you must complete the application. And our local community college is Triton. That's where you'll pay, in district fees, and the other surrounding ones, you do have to be, we do want to caution you that it will be a higher cost despite it being a community college. Can you talk about the pros and cons of regular decision versus early action versus early decision? Great question. Why should a student attempt to make one or another decision?
So I can try to field that one. First of all, a lot of these are going to be individual decisions, right? Like, are you madly in love with this school? Do you think that you're going to be able to go to that school if you do get in? You're making a commitment, you're signing a contract at that school. Are you going to be able to afford that school if they don't offer you enough money? Because it is a binding decision. There's a few caveats. Again, that goes to the individual conversations about whether or not early decision. I am a giant fan of early action because it just makes the holidays comfortable. You just know that you've been accepted to whatever school it is, and you get to tell your grandmother or your aunt and everyone else who's asking that you're accepted to school. It does make me a little nervous when kids only do regular decision and they're walking around our halls in March, just not knowing anything. So again, ED is for those who are madly in love and really are just trying to put all their eggs in that basket. Early action, I think, is better if it's offered, and then regular, maybe a mix of EA and regular.
I do want to tackle a couple of things here that seem to be in the same vein. The scattergrams, COVID, and how our college is looking at remote. So what we can offer to you is that the scattergrams that you see in Naviance, that's a compilation of information over the past 10 or so years from just OPRF kids. So it really is looking at apples to apples in terms of, are our students getting into those particular schools? Now, because we're on the cusp of this, year and a half where things have changed, we don't have those details, nor will the colleges of choice. So again, we go back to the source. They tell us that they are reading more holistically, which means for many of those schools, it's not just test score and GPA. So that's when we look at that essay, letters of recommendation, sports clubs activities, things of that nature. But since we're all in this together in terms of all the colleges are going to see a similar pattern, they tend to let us know that they're reading kids holistically. So I hope that answers some of the general questions about scattergram and such. So
there were a couple follow-ups to early decision, early action, and regular. I also wanted to emphasize that some schools will align their early action deadline with their merit aid deadline. And typically there's not a separate application for merit aid. Sometimes there is, but most typically there's not. So you really want to watch and see if a particular school that your child's interested in, if their merit aid deadline aligns with the early action deadline. I know Indiana, off the top of my head, is one that does, and they make it very clear that if you apply by November 1st, you will be considered for their merit aid. If you do not make that deadline, you are not considered. So if you apply regular decision to that particular school, you are ineligible for merit aid. Another follow-up, some schools are only, and oftentimes smaller schools, not all small schools, but some small schools can be early decision or regular decision without the early action in between. We call early decision binding. This is another question because it is a contract. You're saying if you admit me to this school, I'm going to go to this school regardless of the financial aid package, and I'm going to withdraw my other applications from other schools. Now, also what was asked was, what's the penalty? You know, parents have been gone to admissions offices and certainly maybe a financial situation changed and they work that out, you know, directly with the college. It's not necessarily advisable, especially if you've withdrawn those other applications, as you know, you've signed and agreed to do. So it's not great to apply early decision and think you're going to just like check out all your other options and then back out of a contract, because it doesn't always work out in the student's favor.
And I actually, sorry, go
it
ahead.
also hurts our students, our future students. So if you can just think about what we sign the contract also, so the school does, the counselor does. And so if we get a reputation with colleges, and we, by the way, benefit tremendously from our reputation with colleges, but if we get a reputation with colleges that we play fast and loose with those early decision deadlines, then that's going to hurt future students. So just my 2 cents on that.
There's a really good question in the Q&A about considering a gap year. Would you recommend that students apply to colleges this year and then defer? We absolutely do, because you know what, you have hands-on help. Someone's going to, you know, help usher your child's information to those colleges and universities. So it does benefit the student and the family to go ahead and still go through the application process. And if the school of choice would allow the child to defer, that's great. Then we could also be there to help you with that transition into the gap year. So we do very much, you know, from my experience, almost every single one of my students who has gone to a gap year, they've done the traditional application process and deferred to that particular school of choice. So it's a really good question. And there's one here, maybe I can shoot to Ms. Lynch about, can you describe the process, Ms. Lynch, with students who have IEPs and how that information is shared with colleges and universities in terms of like how our transcript doesn't differentiate, but how the parents can follow up?
So we, there's nothing signified on our transcript that says that your child had an IEP. Also at the transition meeting, the final IEP meeting of the year, the rights are usually given over to the student at that point. So we are no longer able to even share information with colleges. So then your child can then take that IEP or a 504 plan to the Office of Student Support or whatever it's called at that university, and then they will implement it at the university level.
Perfect. There is one, Ms. Cahill, do you want to take the one about the letters of recommendation link in Naviance and just the process of, because it's not open right now, but as of next week, you want to just share how that works too?
Sure. We've been trying to spread the word, especially to our teachers, it's very common for a teacher to say, sure, of course, I'd love to write for you, register me in Naviance. And Naviance had an upgrade this summer where they made some changes to their interface. So we haven't opened it up yet, not because we're trying to bother students, but we want to show them how to do it next week, because one of the important changes that Naviance has made is there's no longer an all button where the letters can just go to all the schools. Students will decide individually by school which teacher they want to send the letter to, because some schools will only take one letter and some will take two. So the students are going to assign their various teachers to the schools in their Naviance account, and that can only take place, you know, once we get their transcript release form, which we will explain to them next week. So that's why it appears closed, or I had a student email me last night that her Naviance was broken. So not to worry, we're going to be, of course, opening that and showing them how to properly request those letters next week. They are certainly should be encouraged to ask the teacher if they have not already lined up a teacher to write for them. Someone asked in the chat how many letters. I mean, 2 is the most common, but there's a lot of schools that just take 1 and many that take 2 and an optional third. So it really just varies school by school, and some don't take any.
Oh, good question. There's a couple things in the chat too, just in terms of, maybe I'm going to ride the coattails of the gap year. There was one here about, let's say the child decides to defer at a college or university because they want to go to Triton for a year. So that's not a typical deferment. So you will be looked at as a transfer student. There are some programs at Triton, however, that I do think you should research. One would be the Triton Scholars Program, and one is the Triton Trustee. So if you meet the criteria for either of those, you get a lot of added benefits. And Triton then assists the students with that transfer piece to their college of choice. So if you do decide to go to Triton, most or if not all colleges will look at that student as a transfer when they are ready to matriculate to the next program. That was a good question. Okay. Let's see. More from the chat.
What time are you on, Brandy? Like what?
I started at the bottom and I'm going up because I assume you guys maybe hit some of the ones that were early. So we can talk about the difference between the ACT and SAT tests, and is it beneficial to take both? Rule of thumb, there are programs that you can look at where it shows the different components of an ACT versus an SAT. And what I ask my students to do is to see where their strengths lie. And again, the SAT has to be taken because it's a state requirement for us, but other of my students have found that the ACT, lended better to their learning style. Quite frankly, over the years, these two different testing opportunities look very, very similar. So what I would have you do is talk directly to the counselor. Those are conversations that we would each want to have with the student, so we can make that best recommendation. It's a little individualized of sorts. So yes. Ms. Lynch, you want to take this one? What about letters of rec from non-junior year teachers, like sophomore year, because of lack of report from last year? Great question. We've had this so many times.
We spent a lot of the time this summer talking to college reps about all kinds of things, and a couple things came through. First of all, everyone went through this pandemic. Everyone was home. Everyone knows the limitations of remote learning. Colleges know it. Families, of course, experienced it as well as kids. So I say, and I think our college reps mostly agreed, all bets are off. We used to say junior year is really important, but we know that this class of 2022 did not have a typical junior year. So I would say absolutely ask the teachers that your child knows the best and knows your child the best. And that may be from even sophomore year or freshman year, because sophomore year we also know is truncated. So I say all bets are off on that, but generally academic teachers are your go-tos because we're trying to show your child in their best academic light, rather than, unless they're a theater kid or they're an art kid or something like that.
Two additional questions from the chat that are quick. Quick update on the upcoming meetings, Tuesday and Thursday of next week. Your child has received an email, or will tonight or tomorrow morning, that shows when their counselor is presenting on Tuesday or Thursday. They don't have to necessarily come to our session, although we would love that. If they have a study hall third period and I'm not presenting, I am very comfortable with, my students going to any counselor. We're going to give the same presentation. So Tuesday and Thursday, this is sent through the student email. Parents will get a copy through Naviance as well, if you want to take a look at that. And the next question is, do all schools accept a counselor letter? No, all schools, don't. So it's case by case, absolutely case by case. Okay, so another one that's in there. Anybody feel comfortable with taking the UK schools and discussing the UCAS? I mean, I have a little spiel, but go ahead, Ms. Lynch. We need to know about those applications and letters of rec for teachers.
UCAS has a centralized application system. They're, in the UK, kids read their subjects in their A levels. So when they are the equivalent of seniors here, they will have studied at least 2 or 3, maybe even, subjects specifically. So they would have really done a deep dive into math or deep dive into physics, but they wouldn't have also taken French and English often. So they really have very they narrow down the focus in their final years of high school. And then to the UCAS system, ask kids, and I have most experience with kids applying to Cambridge and Oxford and a handful at Edinburgh, but not like Leeds usually. And there's a UCAS test that they take, and you can take it here. We can, I'm a proctor. All of us can become proctors. You can also take those tests at the British school in the city.
Great, that's very good. Anybody want to take the one that it's asking about resources that list colleges that are particularly good for students who may have 504s or IEPs? I mean, I've used the KNW as my go-to. I don't know if anybody else has resources, but I use the KNW guide.
There's a couple of resources in the resource page. The KNW guide is kind of the standard that we use. There also, I was just doing a search with a student the other day, and I found a couple other resources. Wisconsin Whitewater comes to mind. Obviously, the SALT program in Arizona is another good source. But I also think that kids with IEPs and 504s obviously are different. And so it depends on what the concern is or what the challenges are. But one thing that I've pulled out from many years of doing this is sometimes you just hire a grad student who is kind of like your case manager. And they meet with your kid, every week or a couple times a week at the beginning, and just make sure that they've got an organization system, that they're utilizing their campus resources. But of course, there are programs out there that support kids with IEPs, and the KNW guide is our go-to resource.
The question about SAT scores on the transcript, we do not print any test scores on the transcript. Those would be sent by the student or family. So those will not go on the transcript, and we will absolutely consult with your child and you as well on which scores to send. There's a couple questions in here about SuperScore. I think Ms. Lynch had that slide. Can you just give a little follow-up on SuperScore, what that means?
I think I tried to answer that one by typing. So at any rate, SuperScore is that they will take your best verbal and your best mathematical score from different test dates. So, and same thing for ACT. So if you want to mix and match your English from an April test and your math from a October test, you can do that. Not all schools allow or encourage SuperScoring. They just want you to put your best composite score forward, and that's the one that they're going to look at. And again, that's just diving into the weeds with us. We can do it with your kids and find just the source of that information.
And we know we've kept you over an hour. We tried to keep it to an hour. We're gonna stay a little bit longer and answer any questions, but I know some of you have other plans, other things that you have to do tonight. So please do feel free to leave the session, if you're done tonight, and please don't forget to reach out to the counselor of your child so that we can have those communications if there's anything you didn't get answered. There's a question about when should you apply for grants. So just as a technical October 1 date, that's when the FAFSA, you're able to submit the FAFSA, and that's where you will find grants and federal money coming from there. So yeah. Do you guys see anything else in the chat, Ms. Cahill, Mr. Rajewski, that as we're scrolling through that hasn't been answered yet?
Is the current admission cycle 21-22 or 22-23? Well, they're going to attend fall of 22, so they're the class of 2026. But this is the 2021-22 school year, and I believe that's what the Navient or the Common App rollover was, just the most recent rollover on August 1st.
That's right.
So 21-22. Sorry, I had to say it out. I had to go through all the units.
It is a good question that came up too about the transcript. It does say, are schools notified of the courses that students take senior year? Yes, they are. On our transcript, when we send those away, it will have the students' full schedule, first semester and second. So we do need to be pretty cautious in terms of how that schedule fluctuates and changes throughout the year. So some schools, some colleges don't like that, math is dropped semester 2. So yes, they do see that. They do see that.
And another thing is there's a really nice trend in admissions where kids self-report their transcript. We don't actually have to submit it. We still want them to tell us that they're submitting it, but they self-report. And schools like University of Illinois are big believers in self-reporting. And so if a kid says that they're going to be taking AP whatever or a full load, and then they, have a change of heart in January, that's not a good idea. University of Illinois will get upset with a child, and I've seen them even revoke admissions acceptances.
One about the impromptu questions. When I was doing some research on the impromptu questions, that was under the umbrella sometimes that they may reinstitute having interviews. So they would like to see how the student interacts with the person who is interviewing. So those impromptu questions usually would come through that interview session. It's not been common because it is timely and costly, but so those impromptu, when I did my research, was mainly about that interview that happens. So merit-based aid, anybody want to flag that one? When might you get that information from schools on merit-based aid?
So I strongly encourage everyone to reach out to admissions reps on college specific scholarships. That's what merit aid would be. And so often you just automatically qualify for the merit. If you have a 3.5 or above, then you are thrown into the presidential scholarship pile. That is not always the case. There might be specific deadlines. So that's just something that we're going to encourage kids, and you can help us to ask the college reps. We can also really encourage all of you to reach out to financial aid offices. They are in the business to help college remain or become affordable. They are not just the gatekeepers of the big pile of money. They really are interested in using that money to make college accessible. So really encourage you to reach out to financial aid offices.
Yeah. And for merit aid, oftentimes you can find that under the admissions, sometimes a specific school will have, a chart, like Ms. Lynch was saying, for a certain GPA and what the award amounts are. So when you go on a college website and look at their admissions, there's a lot, they're like admissions tab. There's a lot of individualized or specific information on merit aid and different programs and different GPA cutoffs. Someone asked about thoughts on Illinois withdrawing from Midwest Student Exchange Program. There are still a number of colleges that are recruiting students from Illinois or, issuing merit aid more so to out-of-state students as a way to, it's sort of a strategy, right? Because U of I is not as affordable as many state schools. Oftentimes the merit aid will come in at U of I prices or just below. And there are still schools from that Midwest exchange that will be honoring some of those for specific states, Illinois being one of them. Students were sometimes disappointed with Midwest exchange because, for example, it would be all the Wisconsin schools except Madison, or, sometimes they were disappointed with the schools that were in the program. And we wish, of course, that we had more reciprocals and more agreements, but we do not in this state.
And so it looks like, again, we don't want to keep you very, very long. It looks like the team has answered close to 100 questions. We may have a few more open. A lot of those are very specific. So again, we would appreciate those specific ones go directly to the counselor, because again, if we don't know your child, I'd hate to give advice on that. But there is one that's a common one that I'd like to answer. It's about a teacher who retired in June, but agreed to write a letter of rec that, how do we get that into Naviance? Usually our Naviance program will still hold that teacher's name in the queue, so that way the teacher can submit the letter of recommendation. However, there's been a couple of times where we've had to just, come into the counselor's office and we make a couple phone calls, and we use our relationships and our connections with our department chairs to help us get that information to reach out. So again, a lot of things that are specific and singular to each student, that will be handled with each counselor. So please be partners with us and let us know how we can help best. Again, we are going to meet with your children next Tuesday, Thursday. Please take a look at your email. You'll see the grid. And again, we just really very much appreciate you being with us this evening. And we know we couldn't get to all the questions, but again, with our 15 counselors, please utilize us. We absolutely like partnering with our families as much as we can. So Ms. Lynch, any other closing comments that you might have this evening? Ms. Cahill, Mr. Rajewski?
No, thank you
Use your
very much.
counselors. We're here.
Yes. Okay. And we will.
I'm going to try my best to keep answering these And then I will get those out to you guys, to the attendees tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Next slide, please, sir. And as Ms. Cahill continues to go through, and if you have specific questions again, you can find all of our contact information at oprfhs.org, and we're Alpha, so you should find our names on the website. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And at this time, if you would like to exit the webinar, we appreciate your attendance. Thanks so much.